Are your kids getting to the age where you know you need to have the talk, but you just aren't sure where to start? Do you worry that you'll rob your children of their innocence or overexpose them if you talk about sex? Does it feel like you've already missed the boat with these conversations and now you're looking for ways to approach this very important topic? Then we're glad you're joining us for today's episode. I'm your host, Alex Cody, and welcome to my mom's podcast, Parenting with Ginger Hubbard. Ginger is the best-selling author of Don't Make Me Count to 3, Wise Words for Moms, and I Can't Believe You Just Said That. She speaks at moms conferences, homeschool conventions, and Christian schools across the country. You can check out her parenting resources, find out when she's speaking in or near your area, or explore the possibility of having Ginger lead a mom's conference at your church or school at gingerhubbard.com. If you enjoy this podcast and want to help support our ministry, one way you can do that is by purchasing Ginger's resources directly from her website instead of other online retailers. And stay tuned until the end of this episode to receive a discount code on your purchase at gingerhubbard.com. Thank you for your support, listeners. This enables us to further our mission to help parents reach the hearts of their children for the glory of God. I want to take a moment to tell you about CTC Math, a flexible and convenient solution for kids' math learning needs. See, when I was a student, algebra was way too easy and geometry felt impossible, and there wasn't a way to customize learning to challenge me where I excelled or help where I struggled. So that's why CTC Math is perfect for busy families and homeschoolers, because it allows kids to learn at their own pace and in their own space and on their own terms. Your kids can learn anytime and anywhere, whether it's at home or on a car ride. And the best part is parents can easily track their child's progress with detailed reports. And it's not just a list of grades. There are real insights into how your kids are learning, what they're excelling in, and where they could use more support. So head on over to ctcmath.com, sign up for a free trial, and discover the joy of flexible, stress-free learning with CTC Math. That's ctcmath.com. Well, what's up, Mom? Today's topic is one that I think a lot of parents just aren't sure how to approach. Maybe it's something your own parents were too embarrassed to talk about when you were growing up, or maybe you just can't figure out how to start the conversation with your kids. Why is it so important to talk to your children about the birds and the bees, and what does the Bible say about it? So we've invited today's guests to share some great tools and encouragement for parents to have healthy conversations with their kids about sex. And if you love what you hear today, please stick around until the end of this episode and we'll tell you how to get a discount on their online course. So Mom, why don't you introduce us to our guests?
I would love to, because I am just so excited about our guest today. Mary Flo Ridley has been equipping parents for over 40 years, beginning with a parenting seminar in the Dallas area where she taught families how to talk to their children about sex. She combines medical research, personal stories, and humor to walk parents through practical, specific ways to answer those early questions with confidence. Mary Flo grew up in El Paso, Texas, graduated from SMU, and she and her husband Dave have been happily married for over 40 years. They have 3 married children and 9 grandchildren. Megan Michelson was born and raised in Dallas, Texas, and graduated from Baylor University. Before stepping into the world of sex education, she was a middle school teacher, which definitely prepared her for honest questions and big emotions. So when she's not speaking to parents, she is also just right there in the trenches of motherhood herself. She says that she is so happy, so tired, and learning as she goes. And I think we can all relate to that. Megan has been married to her husband, Blake, for 17 years, and they have 3 children. So Mary Flo and Megan, we are just, again, so excited to have you guys on, and thank you both so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us. We're delighted to be here.
Thank you so much. This is fun.
I would love to jump into our first question that's more like practical related. So I think many parents' hesitation to talk about sex doesn't come from a desire to avoid the subject, but from not knowing how to begin. So how do parents start having these conversations, and at what stage of childhood is a good time to start?
I think as simple as body parts is a really great place to start. Parents, particularly, well, parents of, toddlers, potty training, you're staring at these body parts all the time, right? We're talking, looking at naked kids all the time as parents, the baths and potty training and changing diapers and stuff. So I think a simple first thing to do is to use the anatomically correct words, to incorporate words like penis and vagina into your vocabulary and into your conversations without creating shame, without creating secrecy, avoiding what we call your wingy wangy words. So we're not enhancing the silliness that's already there. So I would say a very practical first step for parents listening, if they're thinking, okay, I want to get there, and I want to be having these healthy conversations. Where do I start? I would say start there. And a quick follow-up question we get a lot is, okay, fine, I can do this. I think I can say the word penis, but do I have to like always say these words? And the answer is no. I mean, we encourage you to get rid of those silly words, but you can replace it with privates. So like if you're going to your mother-in-law's house, to visit and you think she would die if she heard your 3-year-old say vagina, you can remind her, sweetheart, that's your vagina. It's also a private part. So if we're over at grandma's house, you can just, if something's bothering you, you can just tell me your privates are bothering you. Now, it's not a guarantee, but I would say it's a great practical place to start, because essentially what we're doing at Birds and Bees, our mission is to get rid of the talk. And if you're not watching and just listening, I'm using quotation marks because that's just one big bombshell conversation. And what we're trying to do is teach parents how to break that down into little age appropriate conversations. And having that correct vocabulary is a great foundational tool and a really helpful place to start having these conversations.
And also kind of the prequel to that, like there's one other step in our course that it precedes vocabulary. And that is, and I think Christian parents can particularly take this to heart, is where am I going with these conversations? Like before you ever even say a word to your child, it's really good to have a family message. Like, what is the main thing I want my children to know about sex if they're growing up in our family? So to have background conversations with your spouse, or if you're a single mom, just in our workbook, you can go through all those questions on your own or with a trusted friend to think through, why am I having these conversations? Where are we going with this? So that these conversations can be God honoring. And you can see, okay, what we eventually want to do is make sure they know that sex is designed by God for his purposes and glory. And so it just changes the reason why you're moving towards your children with this information is eventually I want them to know what. So actually our course is taken by Christians and non-Christians because of that message. The message, if you want to talk to your children, but you're actually not going to be basing it on biblical values, what are you going to build it on? And if you are, here's a lot of information on which you can build your messages. So it's kind of a get ready for these conversation that you have with your spouse to say, where are we going? What is our family message? What does God's word say about this? And then you can start, with the vocabulary, but that's the most practical way that any parent can just off the block start.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's good. One question we hear from parents all the time is how to strike that balance between preparing our kids while also protecting their innocence as long as possible. We, of course, want to be the ones guiding these conversations, not the culture. But it can be hard to know how much is too much too soon. So, how can we be proactive and still protect our child's innocence and not overexpose them to too much information at once?
So first thing I would say is I think as parents, particularly as Christian parents, and we're speaking into that because of this platform, but I think we have to remind ourselves as Christians that we have a good story to tell. And we're not telling them anything bad. We're not telling them anything dirty or inappropriate. And so I think we have to remind ourselves that, because even as believers, we are so integrated in the culture that we think we're telling them something bad. We think we're telling them something dirty. But the reality is, if we really believe what God says, then we have a good story to tell. And we shouldn't view the idea of sex as something that's going to strip them of their innocence if we're sharing it in our voice and our values. So I think kind of shifting gears a bit into really stepping back as an adult, thinking, what do I believe about sex? Do I believe it's actually a good thing? Do I believe it's actually a God-given thing? Or do I believe what the world says about it? And then I think stepping back into those conversations changes your view a little bit. Now, that doesn't mean sit down with your 4-year-old and tell them everything. I think practically speaking, you break it into smaller little conversations. But I think just as a quick footnote on that question before you can add to it. But I think it's really important as believers to remind yourself we have a good story to tell, and we're kind of letting the world win if we're falling into this idea of, oh, I just don't want them to know about that because it's so icky, or ooh, not today, because it's like that's wrong. And if we really believe that this is a good thing that the Lord He's created, then that should be very freeing to us. And I think so often Christian parents are stuck over here in the worldview of it and are channeling all their conversations through that lens. And we have a completely different lens as believers.
We also think that what they hear from their parents is actually their best protection. So if we, in those early years, fill them with, the understanding that by God's design, this is how a baby's made. By God's design, this is how a baby's born. By God's design, and He so beautifully has presented this in Genesis. Like we get the floor plan before the fall. So we get to go back and see what was His original design before the fall and how good was that? It was good. It was perfect. And if we can say now, of course, we don't live in the garden anymore. We live in a fallen world. And the way that the world has twisted this is not of Him. But what did He originally design is there. It's like we found the old design, and we can still promote that. We can still say this was His original calling for male and female, for there to be oneness without shame, for there to be beauty in marriage, all of those things. If we are going to present the world vision, yeah, we do want to protect them from that. But if we are presenting the biblical vision, He hasn't hidden it from us. He's put it in the very first book of the Bible. He hasn't said, I don't think you should know about this yet. No, He's presented this very clearly from the beginning. So like Megan said, it's a mind shift because most Christian parents want to protect their children from all of it instead of just protect them from what the world has to say about it by being the first one. Like if you present it first, then that is really a lot of their protection. If you say nothing, you think you're protecting your child, but you're actually making your child more vulnerable because the first person who does present to them most likely won't have your values or biblical worldview. And so what we try to help parents see is that we don't want to equate innocence with ignorance. Like you can be biblically wise and know a lot of things, and that is innocent. That is an innocent mindset because you're having a godly mindset. You can know nothing and be vulnerable. And so that's actually not protecting your children. So it is a real turnaround for Christian parents to say, oh, I'm supposed to be somewhat bold about this, or I'm supposed to be unafraid of this. Like Megan said, we have a beautiful story to tell. So actually, when they're young, you focus on the beauty. And then you can go into the boundaries of that beauty, and then you can go into the brokenness. But it's a progression that grows. And that's why it's so exciting to think about the revolution that could take place if we stopped the idea of the talk, like that's, toss that out. Mm-hmm. We're starting young. We're starting with the beauty. We're continuing with the boundaries and with the brokenness. So we have a long time to talk to them. Anyway, obviously we get very excited about this, but it is exciting to think there's really a different way. And it doesn't involve ruining their innocence. It involves protecting their innocence.
Hearing y'all talk about this makes me so excited because like literally everything y'all say is stuff that me and my husband have talked about in the way that we want to have these conversations. So I'm so excited for our listeners to be able to hear all this. And Mom, you can speak into this if you want to, because, I know you wish that there would have been resources like this when I was growing up, because we did have like a sit down, the talk. I remember the first time I heard my cousin say the word penis, I was like, Like I was shook. I was shocked. And then I remember a conversation I had with a family member, and I said, "Do you and this person, their spouse?" I was like, "Do you and your spouse still have sex?" And I had just learned about what sex was, and to me, it was a behind closed doors conversation that was a sit down and have the talk. So it seemed taboo. It seemed funny to think about and to bring up. And the family member got offended because I'm a little girl asking about it. And of course, like we hadn't, because mom didn't have these resources growing up. The person that I asked that question to didn't have these resources growing up. So everything did seem like scandalous, if that's a good word for it. Mom, can you speak into that a little bit?
Yeah, I totally agree. If I could go back, this is one of my biggest regrets in raising my kids because I didn't know how to have those conversations. And Mary Flo, like you, I'm sure Nana wouldn't mind me telling this story, but my mom, she didn't have those either. It seems like this gets better with every generation because we have people like you that are speaking into this and saying, hey, it's not good to not have these conversations early. And here's how you can do it in a way that is beautiful and gives our kids the right biblical God honoring perspective of what sex is. And so that's why I'm so thankful. I wished I would have known you a long time ago, Mary Flo. But my mom, we didn't even really go off somewhere and have the sex talk like Alex and I did. She took me to see the movie The Blue Lagoon. On the way home.
Oh,
On the way home,
Nana was not a believer. Let me please
she was not
put
a
that out
so
there.
Right. And she just didn't know. She was like me. She didn't know how to have these conversations. So she takes me to see the movie The Blue Lagoon. And then on the drive home, she goes, "Do you have any questions?" I'm just sitting there going, I don't know.
We do not advocate for watching The Blue Lagoon with your children.
Don't
Let
watch
me
The
put
Blue
that
Lagoon
out
with
there.
your kids. But anyway, it's just a funny story because it just goes to show you that moms and dads have the right motives. They want to do the right thing. They want to speak into this the right way, but so many just don't know how to do it, and with my mom taking me there, and even the way that I did it with Wesley and Alex, it was more of a sit down conversation. And do you have any questions? It wasn't this daily, when there's an opportunity that presents itself, you're able to speak into it. That's just so much more healthy. It's just so much more healthy. And so I just go back to how thankful I am for what you guys are doing.
After walking through unexpected fertility concerns in 2024, my husband and I decided we wanted to be more proactive about preparing for pregnancy by really focusing on my health. In a huge way, I prepared was by starting a prenatal regimen with We Heart Nutrition. And by the time we conceived, I just felt so much more at ease. And while that peace was a gift from the Holy Spirit, it also came from knowing my body was actually getting the nutrients it needed with We Heart Nutrition's bioavailable ingredients to support a healthy pregnancy. And their prenatal even received the Clean Label Purity Award, meaning it's been independently tested and awarded for its purity and quality. And I've had a really smooth pregnancy so far, praise Jesus. So if you're actively preparing your body for pregnancy, or even if there's a chance that you might get pregnant, I highly encourage you to start a prenatal regimen with We Heart Nutrition. They are a pro-life company that gives 10% of their proceeds to pregnancy centers, supporting women and babies in a really meaningful way. Go to weheartnutrition.com and use code GINGER at checkout for 20% off your order. That's weheartnutrition.com, code GINGER.
Are you frustrated with the high cost and low return of health insurance? I know I was. After my husband experienced 2 medical emergencies and we lost our insurance, we were discouraged and concerned when we couldn't find affordable health care. That's when we turned to trusted friends who told us about Redeem Health Share through Samaritan Ministries. We heard testimony after testimony of how Redeem serves its members with compassion, stays aligned with biblical values, and focuses on ministry, not profit. Members care for one another, both spiritually and financially, during seasons when support is needed most. Y'all, this is what true Christian community is all about. Find an affordable solution that's right for your family by clicking on the link in the show notes or go to redeemhealthshare.org.
A lot of our listeners might be listening and be thinking, well, my child has never asked a single question about sex, or maybe I should have started initiating these conversations a long time ago, and they feel like they've missed the mark or missed their window. So with this in mind, what would y'all like to say to the parent whose child has never asked questions or to the parent that's feeling like they've missed the boat initiating these conversations?
So for the parent who has a child who's not asking questions, we cover this topic a lot because every kid has different personalities. And typically in a family, there's the question asker who, if you have one of those, you know it because they're just mom, 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 dad, 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 why, how. I mean, they are just always they're gonna keep these conversations going, and that's helpful. And typically their brother or sister is the opposite. And you're kind of thinking, is there anything going on in there? We don't know. Is he thinking at all? But we are proactive parents, right? And that is something we really try to train parents to be through our course is to be proactive and be prepared. And so you now have information you want to get toward your child. And we're not just going to sit around and wait for them to ask questions. So if you do have a child who's not asking questions, you move towards them with this information you want them to have. And a helpful phrase we always share with parents is the phrase, have you ever wondered? Have you ever wondered how that baby gets out? Well, it's amazing. And I'm going to tell you because Mrs. Smith just had that baby and it is just a miracle. And tell them how the baby's born. So, have you ever wondered is a great way to move towards those kids who aren't asking questions. Because really, just because a child's not asking questions doesn't mean that they're not inwardly curious. And so, again, so much of what we're trying to teach parents is we want to take the onus off the child. It's not up to a 6-year-old to ask these questions if they don't know how to articulate them. It's not up to the 13-year-old who's so uncomfortable in their own body and their own social life and everything to ask their mom if they can get a sports bra. We are the adults. And so we really want to put that on to the adults of like, hey, we are the adult in the room and we can be proactive about that. And then Mary Flo, why don't you talk about that second question, which I think was, correct me if I'm wrong, what to do if you're sitting here thinking I missed the boat. Is that right? Or I should have started
Yes,
earlier.
that's right.
Exactly. I want to add one more thing, though. Another great way to start conversations is read the Bible with them.
Mm-hmm.
How many sex stories are in there? And even if you just go back to Noah, why? Why did God say he had to take 2 of every animal? Think he could have had a much smaller boat. That could have been so much easier. But he was committed to his original design of male and female. Do you understand what that means, male and female? Do you understand how important that is to God and how that's part of his original design? And he's committed to that. So, or, Potiphar's wife and Joseph for maybe a teenager. How did he get away? Why did he know it was important to get away from her? And David and Bathsheba and Jacob's kind of messy family. Like there is just story. And how did Jesus react to people in sexual sin? At the woman at the well, he moved towards her. So we have lots of stories in the Bible that if you're reading your Bible with your kids, you can go to. But let's say you feel like, oh my goodness, I have a 13-year-old, I have that 13-year-old, and I have not moved forward with this at all. And so I think a little bit you own it. You've got to go through the uncomfortable, just tiny uncomfortable process of saying, okay, there's a topic that's never been on the table at our house, and that's on me. And but we're going to change that, but not tonight. Like we're going to start next week. So I'm just letting you know that next week, every Tuesday night we fold clothes. And so I want you to fold clothes with me. And as we're folding clothes, I want to talk about the topic of sex. And I want you to be thinking this week, do you have a question for me? And I have one thing that I want to tell you, but we're not going to talk a lot about it. We're just going to start talking about it. Or maybe you say, we're going to, every Thursday I drive you to soccer and it's almost 40 minutes away. And so we're going to use that time while you're in the back seat. But know that these are better conversations shoulder to shoulder with the older child than they are. I want you to sit right across I have something I need to tell you. Let's don't make it heavy. Let's make it while we're making cookies or while we're, doing something together or taking a walk, and start with just a small conversation and then say, okay, that's all for now. I'll meet you back here next Tuesday. That was weird, but we got through it. And next time, I'll bring popcorn and make it better. So just, laugh at yourself a little bit. Say, Nana never told me. I didn't know how to get started. I meant to do this like 8 years ago, and it's been on my list. So you just need to break the ice with them.
And we always encourage parents. Our goal is for you to become a purposeful parent on this, not to be a perfect parent. So we're all going to mess up. We're all going to say the wrong thing. And so circle back. Let's say your kid's only 8 right now, and you're thinking, oh, well, I just told them we go to the doctor. I didn't tell them exactly how a baby's born, or I didn't talk to them about seeds and eggs or whatever talking tip it is you missed. Go back to them. Sweetheart, earlier today, you asked me this great question and I just messed up. So I'm going to try again. Or, a birthday. Now that you're turning 9 years old, I want to tell you a little bit more about the day you were born because, oh, it is just so exciting. So just look for opportunities to move towards them, whether that's more intentional if they're a little bit older, like, okay, between now and before you go to summer camp, or between now and when you go to that middle school, we're going to cover these topics. What we don't want, and this happens sometimes with parents of 12 or 13-year-olds, they come here to a live event, or they take the course, or they listen to this podcast and they finish it and they go, okay, well, as soon as that girl gets home from school, you sit down. It's like, no,
we're going to catch up today.
That's not what we're doing. So give yourself a long leash, like Mary Flo said, for the next
Yep.
this is what we're going to do. Because again, our approach is a little by little approach.
Right. And that is absolutely the best approach. And I love the idea of, too, we're going to be talking about this on Tuesdays while we're folding laundry or while we're walking or while we're going to the soccer game. And so, if you have any questions, be thinking about those. And then that gives them the opportunity to think, what am I curious about? What do I really want to know? And gives them a heads up that in preparation to ask those questions. So that is just so smart and wise, such a wise way to approach it, because we want our children to grow up with a clear understanding of truth. But, the simple fact is that they're constantly being influenced by messages that can distort that truth, both in the culture and around them online. So how do we talk to our kids about, let's talk about that, about some of the more confusing or even degrading messages that they see around them? And can you talk a little about online dangers?
Yeah, so I think it's important for parents, particularly all you sweet Christian parents out there, to be aware that this is a reality. I think so often, particularly with screen safety and pornography exposure with children, it's a very dark topic. That's very heavy, and it's not something we want to talk about. And so I think oftentimes we can have like a defense mechanism is like, oh, not us. We're good people. We go to church. Okay. We go to Christian school. Thank you so much. Not our kids. So this is, we always say in our program, like this is us picking up your pretty little heads out of the sand and saying, ooh, this is a reality. The statistics say the average age a child is first exposed to pornography is 11. And that statistic now is several years old. So I can only imagine it's gone down in numbers. But we all know this. We're raising our kids in a sex saturated culture, and we're raising them in a technology driven world. And so the combination is creating an epidemic to early exposure to pornography. And so we really can't avoid this. And we've got to start entering into this dark place. And I think it's very important for parents to feel empowered by that, emboldened by that. And I love 2 Timothy. It says, for God did not give us a spirit of timidity, but of power, love, and discipline. And he is bigger than this problem. Light always outshines the dark. And so we encourage parents to enter in boldly of, hey, we got to be careful around screens. I mean, that's a phrase you can say to a 3-year-old. You're just setting up these little conversations that build. We're not telling you to sit down with your 4-year-old and use the word pornography. What we're saying, let's talk about good pictures versus bad pictures. We got to be careful with what we see on these screens. If you see something, here's what we're going to do. We're going to turn, stop, run, tell, or we don't ever look at somebody else's private parts. I mean, there's all these little drip, drip, drip conversations we have to protect our kids, because ultimately we've got to prepare our kids and we want to go ahead of them in these conversations. And so I would just hope that parents would feel emboldened that we're not trying to make light of this topic by having these little age appropriate sayings. We're trying to bring light to this topic, and it's very dark. And so I think that as Christians, particularly, we've got to turn the lights on and we've got to just start talking about it, because I think the devil loves the darkness, and he wants us to be so overwhelmed and so scared by this and so disturbed by it that, oh, I just don't even know what to say. It's like, well, I do. Here's what we're going to do, because the Lord is bigger than this, right? And light is bigger than darkness. And so I just don't want parents to feel paralyzed by fear, because that's not where the Lord wants us.
And like Megan said, because it's a dark topic, we usually approach it with the darkness all over our face and with the fear in our heart that we definitely have. And so we're going to have to kind of buck up and not take it lightly, not bring light like, oh, I have something fun to tell you, but take it as seriously as you do around the stove or around crossing the street or around pools before they can swim. There's a very big, or about, I'm just looking out at my car, like You don't get in the car unless we let you in. When you're a toddler, you don't open the door and get in, because what if the door closed? But you don't show them pictures of a third degree burn, or you don't necessarily, go there to the darkest part of it. You just give them what they need to know. When I get close to the oven, this is what, when I get close to screens, I need to be careful. And if I see a bad picture, here's the plan. And so just knowing that plan for right now is all they need to know. But they know that because like she said, if they find out, you may not have any screens at your house, but someone they know does, and they'll just do this. Did you see this? And they'll show them a picture or share with them. And what we want to do is to build an interior filter. Like, there are filters out there, but we cannot rely on those filters. So we need to build in our children an interior filter that understands certain things that we see. If they can stay with us and we don't want them, and they can deteriorate in our heart. And so we want to protect our heart, protect our mind. So we want to be protected from potential things that are on screens. So that the earlier you can start that, the better.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And I'd like to offer some encouragement to all Christian parents that we don't have to navigate these conversations on our own. And God hasn't left us guessing when it comes to guiding our children. He's given us his word as our foundation for truth and wisdom and instruction. And when it comes to something as important as sexuality, we want our kids to understand it through God's design, not the world's distortion. So for parents who don't know where to start reading or, let's say, studying scripture on the topic of sex, can y'all share what parts of the Bible really lend themselves to these kinds of conversations? I know y'all talked a little bit about like Noah's Ark and some of the different stories, like with Potiphar's wife, but do y'all have any other suggestions for our listeners for where to start?
I love Psalm 139 and Psalm 100. The fact that we did not create ourselves, that God created us, and we are fearfully and wonderfully made. And then those can lead to conversations about, honey, how can something be fearful and wonderful? That's kind of weird. It's either wonderful or fearful, but how can it be both? And so talk about that just in nature. Like, we go to the zoo, we see a tiger, but we can look at that beautiful tiger from a safe vantage point and appreciate the beauty because he's in the boundaries. We have a fire pit. So you get around the fire pit, we're loving it. We're, having marshmallows, everything's great, but it's beautiful and we're drawn to it and it's powerful. Fire is powerful, but it's in where it's supposed to be. It's in the fireplace. If it gets out of its boundaries, it can be destructive. So the same is true with sex. Inside the boundaries that God has set up for that, which is marriage, then it is a safe, beautiful thing. And it's very powerful. But the power of it outside of those boundaries can be very destructive. So, there are words and phrases in Psalm 39 that I kind of go to constantly in Genesis. But
yeah, I think Genesis is full of, and I think I like when it says in Genesis that they were unashamed. I think that's to kind of go back to God's design was for this not to be a shameful thing. This was just kind of part of life, and it is part of life, right? I think we talk a lot about kind of the different views on sex where, it's over here is secret, shameful, dirty, and over here it's glorified. It's the best thing ever. It's, at all costs, seek it out, all these things that will fulfill your entire life. Where really it's not that. It's the biblical understanding is it is a part of life. It is for his design for reproduction. It's his design for intimacy. It's his design for marriage. And so kind of just calibrating, I guess, your understanding. And story of the Christmas story, I think is a really helpful one too. Talking to young kids, a virgin, what does that even mean? Well, that's why it's a true miracle story, is because as it takes a man and a woman to have a baby. Well, this is saying that Mary was a virgin. It means she has not had sex. Does that mean you have to say that to your 4-year-old? No, but these conversations build, and so maybe it's the next Christmas it comes around and say, do you remember how I told you about how babies were made? Well, this is what makes the Christmas story such a miracle, is because Mary was a virgin and she was pregnant Like that is a miracle. So I think the Bible is just such a wonderful resource for so many of these stories and for so many of this examples of God's design.
And the marriage of Christ and his church. To have a high view of sex doesn't mean it has to be so high that we can't talk to them. Like, we want our children to grow up with a respect about sex and where God placed it, but not to, like the world does, just glorify it. Say, this is just an appetite. And when you're hungry, you should eat. And when you want sex, you should have sex. Like, that's a common view. That's not
consumerism.
Yeah, that's just a consumer product. There's a great podcast by Tim Keller called Love and Lust that I think it's good for parents to listen to, not with your kids, but just to refine for yourself what is a biblical view of sex. And that's been very helpful for me too.
If you're looking for a way to gather with other moms for fellowship and encouragement from God's Word, well, we have created a brand new resource to help you do that. The Parenting with Ginger Hubbard 6-week study guide is perfect for small groups to use alongside the podcast. Each lesson includes a Bible study, verses for meditation, practical application of scripture for parenting, discussion questions, and a place to record prayer requests. And you can also easily adapt it for individual use, or you can go through it with your spouse as a way to grow together and strengthen unity in the midst of parenting challenges. Get your copy of the Parenting with Ginger Hubbard 6-week study guide at gingerhubbard.com. And don't forget to use code parenting for 10% off your order. That's gingerhubbard.com, code parenting.
Well, Mary, Flo, and Megan, thank you again so much for taking time to join us today. How about telling our listeners where they can go to find out more about you guys and your resources?
Thank you so much for having us. This has been a really encouraging conversation. Thank you. If you want more Birds and Bees, you can find us. Our website is birds-bees.com. And on our website is a lot of information, but most importantly, our online course. And so if you want the most comprehensive resource that we put out there, it is our online course. It takes just over an hour from start to finish, and it walks you all the way through preschool to preteen. And we just really believe it's a excellent work. I can say that because she started it. So take the course, take it with friends, take it with your spouse, take it with your Sunday school class, second grade moms, whatever. That's on our website. And if you just want some practical bite-sized talking tips, you can follow us on Instagram. We are at birds_bees. And we have a great community there that is probably asking similar questions that you've been asking yourself. And I share lots of talking tips along the way. So join our online community or take our online course. We are happy to have you join us.
That is great. Actually found out about you guys on Instagram. I don't remember, maybe a couple of years ago, someone shared your account with me, and I've just loved following you there. And I love that your course is short. That is good because parents are so busy. It can be overwhelming, that these, long courses that take weeks to do. And so, yeah, definitely guys, check out that online course. My favorite thing about you guys, and I see this on Instagram, and I'm sure it's in the course as well, is just how simple and practical you make these conversations that, could be uncomfortable, but you guys just make them flow so easily and naturally in everyday life. So that's just one of my favorite things. And we will have Heather, guys, put a link in the show notes to all things Mary, Flo, and Megan and Birds and Bees. So you'll be able to, if you forget where to go, that information will be in the show notes. Okay, so which one of you guys would like to wrap things up for us and give us just a really short final word of encouragement?
We just want to say thank you to you two for allowing us to be on this platform and reach more parents. And to the parents listening, we would just like to leave you with an encouragement. And we are your biggest cheerleaders, and you can do this. Your voice might sound differently than ours. Your tone might sound different, your vocabulary, your message, but the Lord has equipped you to parent your children. And so often parents are like, well, can you just come to my house and talk to my kids? It's like, no, we cannot, because you are the one that the Lord has called to do this, and he will equip those who he's called. So step into this. Your children need to hear from you, and you are capable.
Thank you, Mary, Flo, Megan, Mom, and thank you, listeners, for joining us today. Would you like an exclusive discount for the Birds and the Bees online course? Just use code GINGER20 on their website at birds-bees.com. Do you have a parenting question? We invite you to submit it at gingerhubbard.com, and we'll do our best to answer it in a future episode. Visit gingerhubbard.com to find Ginger's practical resources that will help you get to the heart of outward behavior and address it from a biblical perspective. Today, we're offering a discount on Ginger's children's books co-authored with Al Rowland. Sam and the Sticky Situation is a book about whining. Chloe and the Closet of Secrets is a book about lying. And Sean and his amazing shrinking sister is a book about teasing. We're offering $10 off when you buy all 3 books in our bundle deal on Ginger's website. But wait, there's more. Enter the code parenting at checkout to get an additional 10% off your total order. Thank you again for joining us today. We can't wait to be with you next week. Until then, may God bless you as you seek to reach the hearts of your children for the glory of God.